All right, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we really, this whole idea was, this was broad ideas, broad geographic scope, so we invited a colleague of ours, Rich Thorsten, who's the Director of International Programs for Water.org, to give us a little bit of perspective on what are some international challenges in the environmental finance area. Rich?
Thanks, Jeff. Good afternoon. I'm very happy and humbled to be here today. Jeff has given me a daunting task to consider the future of international environmental finance in 10 minutes or less, and with only one visual aid. Now, to be fair, I was asked to focus mainly on water, which, as we all know, is a very simple, easy task. So, Jeff, I got this. No problem. So I'd like to share a few reflections within the lens of a particular example which continues to unfold today. It's the Philippines. In 1997, the government of the Philippines, along with the IFC, the World Bank, and other parties, made a big bet. Prior to 97, Metro Manila, which is an area of over 10 million people in 97, their water and sewer system was one of the worst performing among big Asian cities in the world. 3/4 of the people in the eastern half of the city lacked access to improved water. They were losing about 2/3 of their water produced to leaks, poor metering, and illegal connections. And the operator itself had 2 to 4 times more staff than comparable Asian cities. And they were about $500 million in debt. So what did they do? The government moved from being an operator to becoming an asset owner and a regulator. They divided the area into two zones, an eastern zone and a western zone. And within each zone, they offered private water companies the opportunity to operate with long-term concessions. The eastern zone was ultimately offered to an international consortium, which created Manila Water. And the western zone was offered to a Filipino-French consortium, which eventually formed Manila Water. At the time, it was the largest private sector participation scheme of a utility in the world. So what happened? Well, a lot. The graphic on my right side was produced by Circle of Blue in 2012. And so here are some high-level results. First of all, about 99% of the population was covered with improved water over a 10-year period. In the eastern zone, they went from 26% up to 99%. Non-revenue water actually declined from 66% all the way down to 12% in the eastern region. The staff was reduced in half, on par with other Asian cities, and the debt was eventually repaid in both zones. So many would look at these outcomes and call this a success. Now, Manila is different from other cities in the world, and it's not been a total victory. Digging deeper, there are a few interesting observations which I think hold some lessons. The first question that always gets raised is, does private sector participation work? Here one is tempted to say yes, but actually the results were mixed. Manila Water, which handled the eastern zone, more than doubled connections, and they reached the lowest income people. They reduced non-revenue water, and they transformed themselves into a profitable company, which actually now has ventures in in other parts of the Philippines and other Asian cities. In contrast, in the West, Manila actually was in trouble after 3 years. They requested to terminate the concession in 2002, and by 2007, it was awarded to another private operator. So to me, the more interesting lessons emerge when you look at the two different cases and what happened. First of all, building the new versus maintaining the old. So the East, in the eastern part, Manila Water invested very quickly in new infrastructure, and they currently reach about 7 million people today. Now, this is a very promising finding in rapidly growing developing cities. It shows that a combination of investments and coverage targets can really enable millions to obtain improved services. But in the West, conditions worsened. 24-hour water coverage actually went from about 85% in 2000 all the way down to 32% in 2006. And it actually went back up again, so it's about 85% today. 90% of the infrastructure, curiously, was in the western zone. Only 10% of it was in the eastern zone, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but it turns out that maintaining the older infrastructure was actually more difficult. It required better planning and different financial incentives. This is important not only for emerging cities like Manila, but also cities in other parts of the world, including here in America. Secondly, improving efficiency. I mentioned the non-revenue water statistic. Manila Water really focused on aggressively metering, cutting illegal connections, and ensuring timely water payments. In contrast, Manilaw's non-revenue water actually stayed flat. Nothing happened over the period. Part of the problem was that they were handling old infrastructure, so they had a hard time raising the cash to develop the new infrastructure improvements that needed to be put in place. Part of it was also because the loans were denominated in U.S. dollars, but they were paying in Filipino pesos. And if anybody remembers their financial history, there was an Asian financial crisis in the 90s, and it really limited their ability to repay that debt. But the point here is that efficiency gains are possible in many areas of the developing world, but only under the right conditions and circumstances. Thirdly, promoting water access. Manila Water allowed their customers to finance access over a 12-month period for the very first time. The World Bank also had an output-based aid program which actually provided targeted subsidies for people if they could show that they obtained a connection after a 3-month period. These programs enabled poor people to participate as customers for the first time through financing and through targeted subsidies, while ensuring that the utility itself did not cross-subsidize poor service. This is similar to what some of our work we're doing at water.org is, which is enabling microfinance institutions to expand access to water and sanitation through microfinance loans, and also utilizing sanitation subsidies in places like India, where those government programs are available. Fourth, tariffs. So actually, in both zones, the tariffs actually fell at the beginning of the period. From 97 to 98, they fell dramatically, actually. And then they rose back slowly over a period of 5 to 6 years. And so that's kind of interesting because they were able to use efficiency improvements to initially lower the tariffs. But over a longer term, the tariffs actually jumped pretty significantly. They've gone over 200% from 1997 to 2012. And it's a source of real contention today. The companies say that they need the additional investment to meet higher environmental standards and sewerage standards. But the customers complain that the price increases are too high and it limits their ability to obtain water. The regulators actually ordered both companies to lower their tariffs, and that's currently in court right now. But one of the things one of the points I want to make about this is that in many cases, it's the people who are not connected at all that often face the worst scenario. This example from a neighborhood here demonstrates that if you were connected to the water system, you were able to pay about 3 to 5% of your income to water. But if you weren't connected, you actually ended up paying about 30% of your income to water. So the importance is getting people connected in the first place and then designing a tariff system that factors the poorest people into account. Nowadays, Manila's water system continues to be operated by 2 different operators, and the focus has shifted a little bit to other areas. One of them is a new water source. Manila has close to 15 million people in the metro area now, but it only has one water source. It has one dam that accounts for all their water. They're trying to build another dam, and they're working with the operators to try to do that, but it's going to be a longer-term investment. Wastewater is also a challenge in Manila. Only 16% of the people have access to sewerage, and they're trying to move away from on-site desludging of septic tanks to actually invest in sewerage treatment, which, as we know, contains a pretty high capital cost. And then another big issue and risk right now is climate change. The Philippines is, by one count, the Philippines places third in terms of countries that are the highest at risk in the world. The situation in Manila is a little bit worse because they're not only prone to droughts, but they're also prone to flooding, which becomes exacerbated because it's a rapidly growing urban area. Yet, in some ways, Manila is better poised to address these challenges than other parts of the world. For example, they have very significant investment partnerships. This is just a snapshot of some of the recent investments that have come in from Manila Water over the last 10 years. And what I want you to notice is that there is significant private investment. Manila Water has an equity investment. They actually trade on the Filipino stock market as well as significant public investment from domestic sources as well as foreign sources. Manila Water has been able to demonstrate that you can piecemeal debt over a period of time, which in the water sector is very important because that's a sector that tends to have high initial barriers to entry and lumpy capital investments over a period of time. And both companies are also considering what revenue streams they can utilize, whether it's methane gas for electrification or the resale of recycled water for industrial purposes. Which of these new revenue streams can be generated for new investments? And notably, they're doing this without any direct taxes from the Filipino government. So that's a very significant finding that doesn't apply necessarily in other parts of the world. So I guess in total, I think there are a few things that you can learn from this experience. One is that by improving efficiency, utilities can use surpluses to creatively finance access to safe water and improve the quality of services. And it's become more possible to finance in ways that actually take advantage of domestic capital markets in developing countries. Private sector participation can be a useful vehicle, but there are also public sector ways and partnerships that can be formed as well. Manila can probably do better on the tariff side, and there probably will be more government investment required over time, especially for wastewater facilities and new sources of water. And finally, there's been a little bit of discussion about green infrastructure, and this is probably an area that Manila and other rapidly growing developing cities can do better as well. Financing land acquisition, providing tax credits for green infrastructure becomes especially important in places where there's so much concrete that's being built in such a rapid period of time. The last thought I just wanted to leave you with is that it's unacceptable that so many people still lack access to basic services today. And longer-term challenges like maintaining facilities and managing water are too often overlooked in an era of short-term thinking and solutions. But it is a very exciting time in the international environmental arena, as this example illustrates. So thanks for your time.